Devil's Bathtub Canyon, Dan Boy the Kid, Wild West Outlaws Western Series by Daniel Valet. It was Thursday night at the saloon, at the card table, and a few friends were playing a friendly game of poker. So, Daniel Morgan, can you tell us about your near-death experience in the canyon? And I thought to myself, if only they knew the dangers that await you in the surrounding region, and the painful sensation of being wounded in such a hot desert canyon, and what it did to a young man like me. Well, boys, it started about 4 weeks ago. The adventure of outlaw Dan Boy the Kid. Devil's Bathtub Canyon. The action-packed adventure of Daniel Morgan, better known as Dan Boy the Kid, a western outlaw of the Old West. My name is Daniel Ryan Morgan. Some people call me Dan Boy the Kid because of my wild behavior and the reputation as an outlaw. I have lengthy bushy brown hair, and I am at the age of 25. I had spent 3 years in prison for many crimes and recently released to start a new life. I had just arrived in the town of Twin Rocks, where I had spent 2 days so far, which already I had gotten into much trouble. My story begins here. These are the orders of Jay Golden, Daniel Morgan's sworn enemy. The feud started in Twin Rocks, a thriving cattle town at the edge of the desert. The young, bushy brown hair, baby-faced gunslinger, that is me. I had 2 days earlier hit the town with nothing more on my mind than a thick steak, a comfortable bed, and a friendly game of poker. However, Banker Golden's hired a young killer named Ruben Anselmo Saunders. He was a tall fellow with lengthy dark hair, half Mexican origin, and about the same age as me, 25. Anyways, Ruben Sanders didn't aim to let me enjoy those delights. Ruben shouted, "Hold it, kid." I had replied, "I never saw you before, Mr. Sanders, but I recognized you from what I heard." "Stand aside. I'm not here for trouble." Ruben Sanders replied, "Better slap iron, kid. I'm gonna kill you." I knew it was a setup. Ruben Sanders was fast, but he was no fool, and he'd have other guns somewhere hidden in the street. So I did the only thing that I could. Golden had shouted at his window and said to the fellow roof across the street, "Kill Mr. Morgan." The man on the roof was thinking to himself, I aim to do it, even if I gotta kill that fucking bastard, Ruben Sanders. A bunch of gunshots rang out in 3 directions. Another shot on the roof. I had taken down Ruben Sanders first, and able to quickly shoot the man dead on the roof, causing him to fall off and landing him into the ground below. Sanders set me up, but I'm not that easy to kill. I called out to a fellow in the street, "Is there a doctor in the Twin Rocks, mister?" "Where's the sheriff?" The fellow replied, "Doc Alden is at the Double X Ranch, and we don't have a sheriff since Mr. Glidden said the town ran out of money." Ruben Sanders asked, "Mister, am I gonna die?" I responded, "You might have a cracked rib, Mr. Sanders, but the slug just broke the skin. Something in your shirt pocket saved you. The rifle slug hit the payoff money on you, Mr. Sanders. All new money fresh from the bank." I thought to myself, the banker ought to be able to tell me who paid for that young gunslinger Ruben Sanders. Later at the bank, I had asked the banker, "Mister, I'd like to know who." Then I quickly paused for a second. "Wait, I know you. You're Jake Glidden. The sheriff in Devil Rock Ridge is still looking for you." Jake Glidden replied, "Come into my office, kid." So I had followed the banker into the office where they had discussed more matters, and I uttered, "So you used the money you stole from Devil Rock Ridge Treasury to open your own bank?" The banker replied, "No one here knows about it except you, kid. I saw you riding into town a couple days ago. That's why I had Ruben Sanders try to terminate you." "Mr. Sanders bungled the job, but I won't. I'll tell everyone you're holding up the bank. They'll believe me because you'll be dead." The banker was just about to reach for his gun in his desk drawer. I had quickly jumped on top of the banker into a struggle and forced the gun out of Jake's hand. Then both Jake and myself fought rough, exchanging a few hard punches at each other. The banker shouted, "You were always tricky, kid." And I replied, "I want you alive." More fighting went on between Jake and I. A few folks near the doorway reacted. "Oh dear, we should help Mr. Golden." Someone else replied, "And why? Jake Golden never helps anyone else." Finally, I was able to take the banker down to the floor. After I got control of him, I had approached the onlookers and said, "Golden's real name is Jake Glidden. He's an embezzler and a con man from Devil Rock Ridge. I'll bet he stole the folks blind here in Twin Rocks." One of the town's businessmen replied, "We can find out in a hurry. We'll go over to his books, kid." A citizens' committee locked up Glidden with Reuben Sanders. These two bushwhackers would never bother anyone again. I had stated to Glidden, "I'm riding on in a day or so. Mr. Boyd and the citizens will get to see what's coming to you." Mr. Golden replied in anger, "I'll go free Daniel Morgan and hunt you down. One way or another, you're going to pay for this." A day later, as I had rode out of town, I thought of what had happened back there. The steak was tough and the bed was lumpy, but Jake Glidden and Reuben Sanders are behind bars where they belong. However, a few days later, Glidden and Sanders had somehow managed to set themselves free from jail and left town. One night, Glidden and his men, along with Reuben Sanders, had made camp. One fellow was a native named Apache Joe, who had wandered off a short distance and had come back to tell Glidden and the others, "Somebody built a fire out there, boss. I'll be back in a minute." The native had wandered near and close enough to where I had made camp for the night. The native listened in as I began to think out loud. "I'll cross the Devil's Bathtub tomorrow. Then I'll find good water and plenty of game." Apache Joe then wandered off quietly back to the associate's campsite and spoke to his boss of what he had saw and heard. The boss replied, "Spit it out, Indian. Was it that baby-faced gunslinger Daniel Morgan?" The Indian motioned his head to allege yes. The boss then said, "Where is he headed?" The native replied, "That boy rides tomorrow towards the valley. A very bad place. No water, even snakes die there. But on the other side of that, there's a stream, a forest, and much hunting to be had." Apache Joe stated, "Me will quietly kill that kid and carve out his body parts out of him, boss." Glidden shouted, "You fool! Leave this to us. We'll kill him ourselves. You just keep your eyes on Daniel Morgan and we'll do the rest." Mr. Glidden went on, "We'll ride all night to reach this Devil's Bathtub before Daniel Morgan shows up. We'll bushwhack the kid there. My plan is foolproof." Mr. Glidden shouted as they rode, "The Devil's Bathtub has one way in and of course one way out. Daniel Morgan will never make it when we're done with him." I was awakened by the first sun. My thirsty bronc was good enough to awaken me. I had uttered, "All right, Chiquita, I'm awake." "I was having a nice dream, amigo." I had said to my bronc, "All right, I'll let you have some water, then I'll dig deeper and fill the canteen." I had put coffee on to brew and impaled some dried beef on a steak. A lean breakfast, but it would do. I had thought out loud, a lot of the men die here in the desert, with water only 3 feet away. If only they dug in the right place. Shortly after the breakfast, my horse and I were on our way to the Devil's Bathtub. As I rode through the canyon, I thought to myself, I could dig 50 feet deep in the bathtub and never find water. I've got to get out of there pronto. Temperatures down there get up to 130 degrees. I'll have to give the horses most of the water if we plan to get out of here from the other end. I had spoke to my horse. It's about 5 miles across, amigo. We'll take it slow and easy. Meanwhile, above the cliffs, Reuben Sanders mentioned to Glidden, "I see dust near the end of the canyon, boss. Is it whom I think it is?" Mr. Glidden replied, "It's that kid, all right." Reuben Sanders mentioned down to Glidden, "I can pick that damn kid off from here, boss." Mr. Glidden replied, "Be patient, Reuben. I want to see his face when the first bullet ricochets in front of him." I had uttered to my horse, "We made it, amigo." Then it happened. One loud shot echoed right past me. I had shouted, "Whoa, boy, whoa." Another loud shot passed by me upon my horse. Mr. Glidden yelled above, "Mr. Morgan, drop the rifle and get off the horse." I had roared out to my Bronco, "Make tracks, amigo. We're heading back." I had thought for sure that Reuben Sanders was up there with Glidden. I had thought to myself, I'm sure lucky they missed. More shooting echoed past me as I rode hard. I had thought out loud, damn, they plugged both ends. On the other end above, Apache Joe yelled out, "Leave horse or we shoot horse." I had shouted back, "Hold it, the horse didn't hurt anybody." Apache Joe called out, "Put down that rifle, put down that gun, or we shoot your horse." I was furious and said, "If I ever get my hands on you." The Indian cut in, "Empty canteen on ground." I had thought to myself, that's too much. I had attempted to drink some water from the canteen before emptying it and dropping it to the ground, but the Indian warned me, "Not drink water." Then quickly, Apache Joe fired his rifle and shot the canteen out of my hands. The native and his partner rode down the cliff towards me below, with their guns set right on my visual. Apache Joe said to his partner, "Take guns, Josh. I get horse." I had asked, "What about me?" The native responded, "Boss wants you to stay. You die soon." Apache Joe took his blade and tossed it into my left chest near my shoulder. The impact had thrown me to the ground. Apache Joe got himself off his horse and came up to me where I was laying and jerked the blade out of my chest. I had forced myself back up and staggered forward. I said out loud, "You bastard! That hurt!" I had unbuttoned my shirt entirely to see my stab wound. I took my bandana out and held it against my wound tightly. Native Joe remounted his horse, where next he told me to start walking. I had thought to myself, they're driving me back to Glidden and Sanders to finish me off. The native and his partner rode with a slow pace behind me, forcing me to stumble forward on foot. Nonetheless, I was also bearing the pain of my knife wound. Likewise, Apache Joe was kept firing warning shots from his rifle to get me to move faster. I had thought out loud, Glidden's gonna want to kill me himself, but Reuben's gonna be pretty anxious to put a bullet in me too. I held my bandana tightly against my knife wound while I walked, as I wiped the sweat from my face. The heat wave shimmered off sun-baked sand, and I didn't see Glidden until he was about 50 yards away. In my weak condition, I had looked at Mr. Glidden and uttered, "Go ahead, finish me off, just get it over with." Mr. Glidden replied, "Not yet, boy. In fact, you don't have to die at all." Mr. Glidden went on to say, "Beg, Mr. Morgan. Ask me to spare your life. Plead with me. Crawl." In my lightheaded state, I replied, "Mr. Glidden, I don't want to die." Mr. Glidden responded, "That's more like it, boy. Did you hear him, Reuben? He's not so tough. He's a coward." Reuben Sanders got off his horse with his rifle in his hands and walked up close to me. He then pointed the rifle snug tight against my gut and said, "Boss, let me be the one to kill him." Mr. Glidden responded, "Sure, kid. Why not? You wanted to kill him from the start, right?" Mr. Glidden had backed up his horse and brought his rifle down in order to watch Reuben do the dirty work. Mr. Glidden shouted, "Go ahead, Mr. Sanders. Anytime you're ready." Instantly, with both my hands, I snatched Reuben Sanders' rifle out of his hands while he was not paying attention and smacked him with the butt of his rifle. Reuben Sanders went down in a daze to the ground. Mr. Glidden was taken by surprise, and he tried to bring up his rifle, but I had slung the rifle around in time to fire. My slug struck Glidden in the chest, which then caused the evil man to drop from his horse into unconsciousness. By then, Reuben Sanders regained his awareness and struggled upwards. Reuben Sanders had quickly drew his pistol from his holster. With the rifle, I had quickly turned around and fired one round into Reuben, the slug bursting into his gut. He staggered about in much pain, coughing and choking up blood. Then I shot him again in the chest, where the same bullet had exited out his back. Reuben Sanders instantly fell dead, crashing him hard into the ground. In a short distance away on his horse, Apache Joe had his rifle already pointed at me. As I turned to avenge him, he had quickly fired his weapon and I took a bullet to my ribs, causing me to fall into the dirt. Apache Joe, upon his animal, next charged towards me to try to finish me off. I saw Reuben's gun in the dirt near me and I had to pull my body forward to grab it. As Apache Joe got closer, he was about to shoot me again. However, I was able to fire back in time and I shot that Indian. dead on his horse. I had then turned my body around quickly and had managed to kill the fourth outlaw, who was just heading towards me. I rested for a sec, doing what I could to catch my breath and make the pain cease. I was weak, hurting, but yet I was able to keep myself stable. I had then forced myself on Reuben Sanders' horse and turned the animal around towards where Mr. Glidden laid. The other animals ran off in different directions, as I had spooked them enough to make them flee. As for Mr. Glidden, he was already out of unconsciousness and was trying to force himself upwards. I had faced him and shouted, "I ought to kill you, but better yet, I'd rather leave you here in this heat. You're wounded bad and yet worse than me, and you will never make it out of here alive on foot." I was feeling all the afflictions, but yet I had to continue and bear it. And I said, "I just have to chance it, mister. At least I have a horse to ride out." I took my last look around before leaving, visually seeing 3 dead bodies, and 1 other that might not make it. In my wounded condition, I had rode west out of the Devil's Bathtub, leaving 1 enemy, Mr. Glidden, in the furnace to defend for himself. Barely enough, I had managed somehow to make it back alive into civilization. First thing is to find a dock and get my wounds tended to. By the time I got a few yards inside of Main Street, I had passed out off of my horse. I had landed close to the town church. The preacher was just coming out when he saw me fall into unconsciousness. With the help of a few fellows, they carried me over to the doctor's house. After several hours, I had awakened, finding myself wrapped in bandages and lying in a bed. The doc mentioned to me, "You're lucky to get back here alive, kid. You came very close to your death, son. You had a bad fever to start with. I had to work on you for several hours to revive you, tending to your stab wound and digging out 1 slug and patching you up. Damn near lost you." I took the advice of the doc and rested for a few days to get my full strength back. And now, back to the present. I had uttered, "You know, boys, I never saw Mr. Glidden again since my bad experience in the canyon. I figured that Mr. Glidden never really made it out of that Devil's Bathtub." One of my friends replied, "Too bad about Mr. Glidden. I reckon he cashed his chips." And I had finally finished off by saying, "And that's how it all happened, boys. The end." Western Tale by Daniel Belay. Narrated by Ryan Wrubel.